My next guest has worked with Premier, Marco Polo, Sky Zoo, the late great Sean P, Master Ace, Talib Kweli, and more. He's not just an artist, he's a true representative of hip hop and hip hop culture. His latest album, produced by Praise, called All Praise Due, is great. He's Torae, and I want to welcome him to the library, live from Hackensack Meridian Health, Stage 17. Thanks for being here, man.
Tim, thank you for having me, man.
It's always a pleasure. So, as I mentioned, I'm going to go all over the place with this thing. On All Praise Due, it's either sampled or you mention their names. You mention and sample either Biggie, Big Pun, Sean Price, and many more. But for those three, what has been their influence on you? But then just the overall, what has been their influence in your mind on hip hop culture?
Three of the greats: Biggie, Big Pun, and Sean P. Two from Brooklyn, right. One from the Bronx, the birthplace of hip hop. So, it's just hip hop all throughout. Just that synergy right there. Pun, one of the greatest lyricists of all times. I think that's not even arguable. Also, I think what he did for the Latin community, being the first artist to go platinum, and really, I think showing guys, like, there were other artists who were Latin that came before him, but Pun really, he was like on the cusp of almost superstardom. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, he had transcended just being a dope MC and a dope hip hop artist. He was like really growing into something else, and it was unfortunate that he passed away so soon. Biggie, just being a Brooklynite, being somebody that really loved lyricism, and Biggie was able to paint such a vivid picture. Like, when you listen to his records, you can see it. He had a way of saying the simplest things but making it sound the illest.
Right,
you know what I'm saying? Like, and he was one of those guys who really had it all covered. He had a presence on mixtapes. Obviously he was still here during mixtape culture. He had the streets, he had the dudes, he had the hustlers, he had the ladies, he had club records, he had radio records. He had something you could ride around to while you was in your Jeep, or if you was running from the cops. Like, he just really covered like all the grounds, and he did it so well. Again, somebody that we lost too soon. Sean Price, obviously somebody who had a really personal impact on me, being one of my closer friends. But long before I met Sean, he was one of my favorite MCs. I grew up in Brooklyn again, and just like Brooklyn MCs for me is something else. It's another layer to it. And they were really close. You know what I'm saying? And when I mean close, is like you could see them, you could touch them. Buckshot spent so much time in Coney Island. I would watch who got the props on Video Music Box, and they come outside and he'd be in front of my building. So like, that was crazy. When I got a chance to link with Sean, he just automatically embraced me, which is rare in hip hop overall, and especially when somebody is somebody that you're a fan of. They say never meet your heroes. Sean was somebody who I was a fan of for such a long time. When he met me, he embraced me and loved my lyricism, and like, that was crazy for me because he was somebody that I had admired from afar for so long. My Pisces brother, we hung out and we did stuff outside of music, which was amazing. And again, of the three, another one that we lost way too soon. So they all had a really big impact on me from a personal standpoint, from a hip hop standpoint, and just as an MC of learning how to grow and develop, myself. They all had a part.
Speaking of Sean Price, on All In Together off of the Barrel Brothers album, he was featured on it along with Guilty Simpson.
That's a hell of a record, by the way.
It's an amazing record. Yes, I have to agree on that. Sean Price, you talk to people, you see, B-roll video, whatever. He seemed like one of the funniest people just to know. But what is it like for you? What was it like just to sit down and collaborate on this record with him?
Anytime you were around Sean, it was just like no holds barred. He always had an amazing story, or 20, depending on how long you were together. He had a story about almost every circumstance and situation. And just watching him write, watching him in his process. I think Hold Up, which we did, what me and Marco did, that was before All In Together. And then actually, the first time I was in the studio with Sean, the very first time, I'll tell you something crazy. The very first time I was in the studio with Sean Price, I was a wee lad, and my man Mighty from Coney Island, he knew I was an MC. He was like, yo, I'm going to take you to the studio, and he was like really tight with Buckshot, best friends. He's like, yo, I'm going to take you to the studio, and you don't know what to believe. But as a kid, you hope. And one day, like, he just knocked on my door in the projects. He was like, yo, we going to the studio. And the session that we went to was for Soldiers Gone Psycho off the Helter Skelter Nocturnal album. Wow. So that was the very first time I was in the studio with Sean. The first time we ever worked on anything together in the studio was for a Babu album. You know what I'm saying? Babu hollered at Sean to do a verse for his project, one of the Duck seasons. And Sean was like, yo, I'm doing this record for Babu. You want to jump on it? Come to the studio. And I was like, absolutely. We went to the studio, we chilled, we hung out, we had a good time, and we wrote and we recorded, and then the song got lost.
What?
And then the song, like, I don't know if because we was in like a hood studio in the middle of the sty, you know what I mean? Like something crazy. And for whatever reason, the session got lost. Babu did hear the record, though. He heard the record, he heard the verse. We never did that record over, but obviously Sean and I went on to record a lot more. And then I ended up doing a solo record on one of the future Babu albums. But that was like my introduction to Babs, you know what I'm saying? Like I heard of me through Sean and loved what I had did. And Sean, you know, was just so gracious and offered me an opportunity to get on a project. That was like one of the first things I had ever done.
Wow. You talk about Brooklyn and you're, from Coney Island.
C.I., what up?
And there's a moment, so obviously New York City, as we know it, is becoming unlivable in terms of like financially.
Jesus Christ.
I mean, I grew up in Washington Heights, and apparently it's more expensive than like Jackson Heights, Queens now.
It's crazy. It's crazy. Anything that's remotely close to the center, which is like the hub, the epicenter, anything that's remotely surrounding that is like skyrocketed.
Yeah, it's done. How has If you go back to where you grew up, how has the prices changed your neighborhood? But two, if you think about how has that kind of the gentrification and the rocketing of whatever apartments, how has that kind of, you think, changed the potential of the artists that might come out of it?
That's very interesting. I think overall you're losing a lot of the authenticity and the culture of these neighborhoods and their native people, because people are being forced out, being priced out. And, you're losing the culture, you're losing a part of the culture. And that's not to say like, it's twofold almost, obviously cleaning up the streets and fixing the sidewalks and having healthier food options in the stores are great, right. But you can't price the people out who made the neighborhood what it is. Walking through the Sty is Stuyvesant Heights now. Yeah. Walking through the Sty is totally different. Walking through Fort Greene, Marco was just here. Marco lives there. Marco couldn't exist on his block 20 years ago. What I'm saying? Yeah. And again, like, it's a good thing, but it's a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, just you don't want the neighborhood, the culture, and the people who really make those neighborhoods what they are to be forced out. Coney Island, I haven't lived in Coney Island in a long time, but I still go there. Like, I still got my same barber that I had since I was a kid, so I'm still there a lot. And I see the changes, obviously there's a big multi-million-dollar baseball stadium. There's still the amusement park that they did over. They just did the whole boardwalk over, and they got a lot more plans for it. But when I moved out, like, you'd be hard-pressed to go in the store and find, like, a 50-cent soda. You know what I'm saying? Like, it was, like, gefilte fish, and, like, they was doing away with the Little Debbies, and all of my neighbors were Russian or Asian, right. Whereas when I grew up, it was just black and brown people, So, you see the changes. You see the changes, and like I said, you take the good with the bad, but you just hate to see, like, people that can't afford to live in the homes that they grew up in or their grandmothers grew up in. And also people be tricked out of their land and their ownership. You had a brownstone in your family for so many years, and then you kind of fall on hard times, or somebody comes around and offers you, $400,000. It's like the most money you've ever seen in your life, and then they turn around and flip it for 2.5. Right. So like, it's bullshit, to be honest with you. So, that's my answer.
And there's a shell for a brownstone in Harlem is $1 million.
Oh yeah, that's on the low end.
I know.
They might still sell crack on that block.
Speaking of neighborhoods, I mean, I think it's you talk about art, and you go to comedians, and the comedians talk about like this. You don't know this guy, but this is my comedian. They're like comedians. You growing up, was there ever? Who was your like MC, like the guy that maybe, or the girl that is not on MTV, not on the video, not on Video Music Box, did not have that hit, but kind of that person that if you brought him or her out, would destroy anyone, but still no one really knows about him?
Well, how do I answer that? I mean, there were guys like the guy I mentioned, Mighty Real. And you've heard Buckshot and Ruck and Rock mention him on records. He was somebody who I looked at. He was like a superhero in my hood. You know what I'm saying? Like his flow and style and cadence and wordplay was like always amazing to me. So he's somebody I took a lot of cues from. As far as somebody who like had records out and did things like, I mean, Smooth the Hustler was always like top notch to me. Him and Trigger, like obviously they're brothers, but just like this synergy was out of this world crazy. And Smooth is somebody whose album I studied because I'm from the school of like we were fans of hip hop first, right? And then you got the passion and the love, and you was like, wow, I wonder if I could contribute. It wasn't like, yo, I can do that.
Right.
It was like, how can I contribute? How can I be a part of this and add something to it? And I remember when I heard Broken Language, I was like, whoa. I was like, yo, if I can't do that or better, there's no sense in doing this. That was my mindset. And I think that was the mindset of a lot of MCs then. It was like, yo, where's my lane? You know what I'm saying? Like, how do I get in? It was so taboo to sound like anybody else or be reminiscent of somebody else or dress or feel like anybody else. So, like, I just remember hearing Broken Language and really my mind being blown like, holy shit, I gotta, like, get better.
Right. You talk about the mentality of not sounding like another MC. Like, I think DMC told me, he's like, you know, everyone's doing red. Our job is to do blue.
Facts.
What about now? I mean, everyone sounds like the same MC.
If you turn on the radio, it's just the longest song ever. Like you never, with interruptions from commercials and then they go right back to the song. It's so hard to distinguish between a lot of the new artists. And, you know, maybe that's just me listening with my 90s ear, if you want to call it that, or my purist ear or whatever. But there are things out that I do enjoy now. So I'm not like new school or new age, anything like that. But you know, it is hard to tell a lot of these guys apart. Whereas before, like when you heard an EPMD song, it didn't sound like a Tribe song, which didn't sound like a PE song, which didn't sound like a Das Effect song, which didn't sound like Redman. You know what I'm saying? Like everybody was able to contribute and do something and be dope, but also find a way to stand out, you know, and I don't know if there's a lot of effort put into standing out. I think it's almost cooler to sound like whatever's out right now so you can kind of just slide in.
I went to some showcase and the DJ was going and she might have changed the song. I'm not really sure. The people in the audience thought she did. And every time they're like, oh, I was like, oh, I had no idea what happened. And then I felt like the old guy. I was like, what the hell? I want to turn to the album. It's a great album.
Thank you.
All praise due. This track, Start Godly. Mm-hmm. It's, to me, I heard it as like you're lyrically laying out your discography. You're kind of reintroducing yourself to everyone.
Right.
Why are you doing that on this track? I mean, you obviously have enough in this game to not have to do that, but this is a track where you're like, all right, let me reintroduce myself to everyone.
I mean, you would think so, but I feel like, you know, like social media is like the gift and the curse because, you know, there's a way to get to a new audience and get a chance to engage with your present audience and things like that. And I mean, I think as an MC, you always have something to prove with every outing. And so on that particular track, when I ran through my discography and like some of my accomplishments, it was a reminder to those who may know me from a few of those, but not all. Or maybe even if you did know me from all, like I just wanted to really like cement it. Like, this is what I've done. If you just got onto me or maybe only know me from TV or only know me from radio, I'm like, no, I've been doing this way longer than your introduction to me last year.
Right.
And I'm not the TV guy or the radio guy trying to rap. I'm the MC that is just fortunate and blessed enough to be able to do other things. So, you know, it was like some duality to it. It was like a reintroduction, affirmation. It was me kind of setting the record straight for some of the new listeners. And again, like every outing, I got something to prove. So let me tell you that I've been putting out records since, you know, I mean, my breakthrough project was in 2008, you know what I'm saying? So we 10 years in just off that. And if you don't count the stuff that I did prior to even getting to the breakthrough, you know, that's another 10 years on top of it. So like, I'm not new to this. I'm true to this, Tim.
You spit, Clinton would have given me the sentence Obama had lifted on Take Notes. What does that track mean? I mean, I've been trying to figure it out, but I think I have you here, so I might as well ask you. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that line, so the preceding line is I'm a terror terrific. So one thing about me as an MC is I like alliteration. If you listen to my music, my discography, you'll hear a lot of alliteration in it. So me saying I'm a terror terrific, TTs, predator that's prolific. When I said predator, it took my mind to the super predator line that Hillary and Bill had made famous back in the, what was that, the 90s?
Yeah.
So when I caught super predator, it took me back into that chamber, you know, where they had these different laws, these drug laws, where they changed these laws, and a lot of people went to jail. You know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of people went to jail for a really long time for crimes that didn't fit. So when I said I'm a terror terrific predator that's prolific, I'm a prolific predator. You know what I'm saying? Like me with, you know, just like lyrical things. Clinton would have gave me the sentence Obama had lifted. So obviously before President Obama ended his term, he had granted clemency to a lot of inmates who were either unjustly imprisoned or just had like ridiculous sentences for crimes that didn't necessarily fit. So it was like a play on words, but also like being very aware of what's going on in politics, while also squeezing in some alliteration and just like, you know, kind of connecting the dots. That's what my lyricism does. It's not all like on the surface. There's like double, triple entendres. There's like things that might connect something that's really street to something that's really educational to something that might be like a reference from a movie, a pop culture. You know what I'm saying? Like really just kind of showing all the nuances of who I am as a person.
How does politics for you play a role in, I mean, your lyrics or in just hip hop culture? I mean, if you look at today, you have Trump as president. How do you,
and Kanye is vice president.
Kanye is vice. So how does that work? I mean, how does like a Trump presidency for you? How do you think that will maybe influence not just hip hop but art in general? Like, I mean, do you see it as like in a weird way a gift because there's so much now shit to pull from, right? Because it's crazy time.
I mean, there's tons of content to pull from. You know, I think all great writers or artists are able to pull from what's going on in the world. And I mean that from, like, you could be writing a sitcom or a movie, or you could be an MC, or you could be a author. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could write amazing things off of what's going on right now, or a comedian.
Right.
You know, it's tons and tons of material out there. Also, you know, I mean, dire straits and hard times. Also, when your back is against the wall, you come out swinging. You know, it's like you figure out a way. There's also the aspect of this presidency connecting and unifying a lot of people, right, you know, on both ends of the spectrum, which can also bring about change and make for better. So I think there are some, you know, some nuggets of goodness kind of engulfed in all of this craziness, but overall it's craziness. To me though, and this is always, and it doesn't matter who's in the White House, and I hate to sound so shallow, but it's like, yo, get money. You gotta get money. And that's not to say like my focus on riches, but like get money and figure out what's best for you and your family and how to get out of your situations and always be better than the person in the mirror yesterday. You know what I'm saying? And it doesn't matter who's in the White House or what's going on. I got to figure out how to feed my family on a daily basis and start generational wealth and break the cycle of growing up in the projects and having broken homes and things like that. And even if you are in a maybe not the traditional family setting, just understand how to change the tide and have your kids do better than you and their kids do better than them and leave a legacy and have something, you know, attached to your last name that's greatness that long lives way after you know, perish from this earth. And that's not going to change no matter who's in the White House.
Has that always been your mindset in terms, like when you dropped 2008? I mean, has that always been what you wanted to, you know?
That was like get out the projects at that point. You know what I'm saying? And fortunately, like I'm so far from that person in 2008, but also I'm still the same exact person. But yeah, it was always about like, I make music not for money, you know, but I do business that would generate good business, you know, and that's like showing up on time and doing interviews and like all the things that are attached to the music industry and the business. But when I go in the studio, it's strictly about making the best art that I can make and you know, catering to my audience and my fan base and growing that. And then once I walk out the booth, everything else is now the job part of it and just figuring out how to get it to the most people and how to do the most shows and things like that. And again, man, like the more that you attain, and I know it's like taboo to say, but I think the more notoriety you have, the more that you attain, the more fame that you have, it enables you to be able to do more. You know, like if I had $10 million in the bank, I wouldn't buy 80 Bentleys. You know what I'm saying? Like I'd be in my neighborhood every day, or the neighborhood I'm from every day, trying to figure out ways to empower the next generation and the generation after, and give them, you know, the tools that they need to compete with what's going on in the world. And that's the best of books or computers or whatever programs they're going to need or whatever STEM schooling they're going to need. You know, it's always about that for me, because again, like having 10, 20 dope projects is cool, and it's something that, you know, like my music will stand the test of time. I believe it's something that people can always go back and listen to. But what's my impact? Yeah. Like how you change the world? Like outside of a dope song, like what am I gonna do that's gonna outlive me and my kids?
On cues, you spit self-taught, learned what I didn't know. What didn't you know about the industry and the business of hip hop prior to getting in?
I didn't know anything, like not one thing. I watched Video Music Box, out to Ralph McDaniels, and I listened to, you know, WBLS and Kiss, and I was like, okay, well, EPMD got Benzes on their album cover, and Eric B. and Rakim paid in full with these MCM suits and Gucci suits, and I was like, yo, like these guys seem like they're rich, like they're on boats and they're making a lot of money, and they from the same like dire straits that I'm from, you know, it's the same humble beginnings that I'm from. So for me, that was really like my escape. It was my escapism. It was something that I was passionate about, but down the line, it was something that I felt like could help change the outcome of my family and where we were, where we started, and not end out, you know, end off where we began. But I didn't know anything about the business. I didn't know what it took to put out a record. I didn't know what it was like to copyright your lyrics. I didn't know what it was like to fingerprint your music. I didn't know what it was like to get a sample cleared or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Like everything that I've been able to accomplish and do in the business, I had to learn from trial and error, and really just not having anybody there to do it for me. So having to figure it out myself.
Did any of that, I mean, like the copyrighting the lyrics or the sampling clearance, did any of that ever come back to kind of bite you in the ass in a way?
No.
Oh.
Is there wood here?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah,
Knock on some wood.
Good. At the end of Got It Hemmed, you say, I always wanted to say that on one of my joints. Are you referring to Nas's Halftime, the sample that's there, which is my favorite Nas song of all time? Or, you know, the Got It Ham, now you never get the mic back? Or is there something else that you're referring to?
It was literally the line before where I said break it down. Yeah. Like, you know, I remember LL, like, break down. You know what I'm saying? Or like, break it down. Like, when you hear break it down, like, usually it went into the bridge or the breakdown of the song. And, like, I never had record up until this point in my career. I never really had a record like that where it was a moment where I could just, like, break it down, you know, and the drums drop out and you just got the keys, and then the violin comes in, and then the scratches come back in. Shout to Boogie Blind, shout to my girl Mappy, who did the violin, and shout to my man Godfather, who played the keys. It was just like me having a musical element in my music, which is something that's important to me. For a really long time, it was all about just like the illest rhymes, the best bars, how you spit the best bars. And now, you know, in addition to trying to make sure that I say the wittiest and dopest rhymes, is also having like a lot of musicality in my joint. So it's not just like a bar fest, you know, it's a song, because music is still music at the end of the day. And coming up in New York, in Brooklyn to be specific, a lot of my early emphasis was on like, I gotta be the illest rapper. You know, like 10 years, 12 years later, I'm not really trying to prove to anybody I can rap. If you know I can rap, you know it. And if you don't think I can rap, there's nothing I can do outside of my discography now that'll prove that to you. So now it's just about creating, you know, dope, different types of art. You know what I'm saying? So like when you walk in my gallery, when it's all said and done, it's like, wow, you know, you see a lot of different colors in my spectrum.
You just mentioned it, but a lot of listeners might listen to All Praise Do and not realize that the piano they're hearing or the violin they're hearing is actually a violin or a piano versus a machine or a sample. And the scratchers are real and the singers are real.
Right.
If you could just kind of expand on like, what is your favorite part about each of these, but what does a live piano or a live violin kind of do for the music as well as your rhymes that maybe the machine could not do at this moment?
I mean, this is just a different chamber. You know, you tap into a whole different level of creation because you when you program in a machine or something on a computer, you know, for the most part, it's just going to be right on the one, the two, wherever you place it. You know what I'm saying? For the most part, that's not to say that it's all like that. But when you creating and you got a real violinist in the studio, you know, Mappy did 1,000,000 takes just to get that, you know, because even when I thought it was great, she was like, yo, one more.
Wow.
And I was like, that's the greatest you're ever going to do. And she was like, one more, you know, or Godfather with the keys, you know what I'm saying? Like him not being trained pianist, you know, but him learning how to play by ear. Like you just get a raw realness in some of that live instrumentation that you can't get where you're just programming. And also, you never know like what being in the studio and vibing and jamming is gonna bring forth. Because I could have an idea, and Godfather could have an idea, Mappy could have an idea, and Blind could have an idea of what we're gonna do. And if I just send them the files, then that's what they're gonna do. But we in that room together and we creating, it's like, yo, you know what'd be crazy? You know what I'm saying? Or,
Right.
yo, that's ill. Or you might make a mistake. And you like, no, we gotta keep that. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, it's just the creative aspect, you know, like really being able to create music is dope, man. And I'm always like welcoming that type of vibe and energy in a session.
Talk about the studio aspect. I mean, you mentioned in the album, I think it's part of an interview or something, that you were very excited to get in studio with Praise because you guys did the email thing prior to that. After this happened, did you ever like look back at the projects you guys did and like think you could have done it in a quote unquote better in a way because if you guys were in studio together? Like, what did the studio aspect
Well, you
bring?
know, we didn't get in the studio. We still haven't. Like I met Praise for the first time last night.
Really?
Yes, and we have been working on music since 2013 or 14. I'll wait until Praise is sitting here on this couch and he could tell everybody why why he really hadn't met a lot of the people that he worked with prior to. But yeah, he came up to New York City. I had a show last night at SOBs and he came up and that was the first time we had officially met. So we have yet to get in the studio to create, but we still have a great chemistry with each other. And obviously there's tons of technology. So even though we weren't physically sitting across from each other, you know, there's Skype and there's FaceTime and there's obviously ways for us to communicate and talk to each other and talk through song ideas without physically being together in the studio. But I am still really excited to see what we can cook up once we do get in the studio and make some records like from scratch.
You know, you obviously talked about why you would work with, like why you work with people. But I want to ask a question that I would ask these producers or artists about you if I were with them. So you talk about Premier or even Praise, Shabam Shadiq, Static Selector, DJ Spin, Pumpkinhead, Marco Polo.
Rest in peace, PH.
Rest in peace, Sean P. Just to name a few of these people that you've worked with. If I was asking them, why do you mess with a Torae? What do you think the common response would be?
He's the illest shit ever.
There we go.
Yeah, pretty much. I would like to think that there's a mutual respect. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't work with people that I don't respect musically or, you know, personally for the most part. You know, obviously, there's some types of paid features sometimes that people just want to buy a verse. And, you know what I'm saying? Like, even with those, like, I'm in a position now where I don't have to accept all of those, or if, like, the artist is terrible, you know what I'm saying? I'll be like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So I'm in a position to be able to pass on stuff like that. But for the most part, like, the people that I seek out or people that I've worked with over my career, they're just people that I think are dope. You know what I'm saying? People that I respect lyrically or production-wise. I mean, we don't, like, Primo and Pete Rock and Large Pro and Diamond and Ninth and Marco and, you know what I'm saying? The list goes on and on. It's not even worth even mentioning because obviously these are some of the greatest to ever do it. You know, but a guy like Praise, for example, or a guy like Eric G, for example, you know, who's Grammy nominated now and works with Ninth Wonder Soul Council. I met Eric G through MySpace. You know, he wanted to send me beats back in like 07. And the first time he sent me a couple beats, I was like, man, this kid is talented, but it's not there yet. You know, but we stayed in communication and we kept talking. And it was funny because I was like, it's obvious he's influenced by Ninth Wonder. Like you can hear it in his production sound. And he kept sending me stuff and we stayed in contact. And then one time he sent the beat pack and it was like 5 joints in there that I loved. And I was like, yo, that's it. Now we ready. And those records ended up going on Daily Conversation, which I dropped in '08. But that kind of was like the catalyst for him to reach out to other people and him meeting Sky Zoo, which then turned into his relationship with Ninth. And now he's part of that Soul Council. I always try to give people that I think are dope an opportunity, talented a shot. So like, if I think you dope, and yeah, I might have Pete Rock and Preem on the album, but you might get sandwiched right between those guys. So make sure your drums is knocking and make sure you find the dopest sample and make sure we make the illest record because you're going to be put right in between those guys and your shit got to stand up to their quality, you know? So the same goes for Praise or anybody that I work with that's new MC-wise or producer-wise. Like, I'm going to put you right in the pit with the Lions and you got to survive.
What do you actually? I was thinking about it. What do you when you're creating these albums, or even for All Praise Due? What are you listening to? Are you listening to any? Maybe not even listen to anything, but what are you? I mean, while you're writing, or
I don't know when I got to that point of not listening to stuff while I'm creating, but I am at that point now. Like when I'm creating music, I'm not listening to anything because I'm not necessarily trying to be influenced by anything or hear something that might change a song. Like. You said Rex. You were just talking about Rex. So, like, if I'm working on a project and then Rex drops a new project and I happen to listen to Rex's project, we might have the same sample. And now I'm in my head like, yo, I got to take that off or I got to flip it and I don't want to be influenced by anything outside of my creative process. So we got the same sample and the record come out and now it's up for the people to decide who flipped the beat the best, who made the better song, and things like that. So I just don't want to have any outside other artists' influences. Obviously, if we working together, we creating together, that's something different. But I just don't like the other noise. You know what I'm saying? Like when I'm creating. But it wasn't always like that. Like when I did the Double Barrel album with Marco, I only listened to Public Enemy, Smooth the Hustler, and Onyx and MOP.
Wow. Because
I knew that was the vibe I was going for. The approach of how I was gonna deliver the lyrics. You know, like Marco. He really like orchestrated that project as far as obviously cooking up the music, but also getting me to kind of like dig in as an artist to deliver the records a certain way where I wasn't super comfortable initially with like being so like gravel pit, you know what I'm saying? But it was like, yo, Double Barrel is like an alter ego. You know, it's a collabo project. So I don't want it to feel like a Torae album. I want it to have a different feel. And I want you to be able to differentiate, you know what I'm saying, between the two projects and the two sounds. And so, like, I'm glad I let him produce me on that project. But yeah, man, I was listening to like Onyx all day. I was listening to Smooth the Hustler, Once Upon a Time in America all day. I was listening to PE all day. You know what I'm saying?
Obviously, you're not just the MC. You do radio. You have a podcast with your daughter called Family Matters.
Yeah.
You have a 10-year-old son.
Facts. Young Tay, young Nick.
What this is going to be? Not going here with not the question you think I'm going to ask, and I'm not going to ask. I have 2 kids myself. What's your favorite book to read to them as a kid?
Oh wow, that's a great question. So I was a young parent, and I read like the stuff that kids were into or the stuff that I thought we should read, like Sesame Street books. And, but music was always like a big part of it, like part of my parenting. So, like anything that Elmo put out was a smash, you know what I'm saying? Taylor, although she doesn't want to admit it, like she came up like a little bit on Barney, you know what I'm saying? Like, so we were into that.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, nah. She'll front on it now. 17-year-old Taylor front, but 17-month-old Taylor was all about that life. And the same with Nick, there's a lot of music. So I'm sad to say there was nothing standoutish, you know what I'm saying? Like as far as literature that I read to them, but I would read, just like whatever books came out. My daughter's like really into anime now. Her birthday just passed, so she got a bunch of anime books, right? And she's also really into reading. And these books they write the books backwards. Like the cover art is on the back is on the front, and you read the books from the end to the beginning, and you also read them from right to left.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I was like, yo, that's like a science project. I'm just trying to read a good story, a good book, and I got to do all this math and science. And Nick, I mean, he'll read like game instructions, how to beat Fortnite online. That's what he's into. So that's what, I'll go over that with him. But as kids, we didn't have that like typical, I guess just because I was kind of figuring out parenting, and a lot of my parenting skills came from the lack of certain things as a child, things that I wanted to, like those voids that I wanted to fill in, but I was also like never really read to as a kid, so there wasn't like a transitional part that passed down to me, which is ill. It's funny because I discovered so many things about my childhood now as a parent, things that I thought didn't matter, or things that I thought like didn't have any bearing on my life or how I am as an adult. And now I see as a parent, like it had a big impact on it. You know what I'm saying? Like that's something I never really thought about. Like I remember, like going to see my son play football or basketball and not having my dad around for stuff like that. Or, watching my parents not be together and deal with some of their demons coming up. And it made me stronger in the sense that it was like, well, I know I definitely don't want to be like that if I have kids. But it's ill because like I try to do so many of those things that I didn't have growing up. So now, like I said, we start in a new chamber, a new chapter, and new legacy. And so things like that I didn't get a chance to do, or experiences I didn't have with my parents, I try to make sure I have with my kids. But that's ill. I never thought about the fact that like I never got read to as a kid.
Is that why? I mean, is part of the reason you started the Family Matters podcast was kind of a way to like, I guess, be closer to your daughter, and I
don't think we could get,
have a conversation, because she's 17 years old, so
right.
I understand that I'm not there yet.
How old are you kids?
4, and my son's about to be 6.
Okay, so you got a little bit of time.
I got a little time. I know, like a guy I know has a couple years ago. He said when his daughter turned 13, he put her aside and said, "Listen, you're gonna hate Dad. I know that. But don't worry, Daddy's still gonna love you no matter what." So I know, and I know how as I was a kid, I was a asshole. But so I mean, is for the Family Matters podcast, is that like kind of a weird way to, I don't know, weird ways. Weird's the word, but to have that conversation with your daughter without her being like, "God, Dad, you're so embarrassing."
Our relationship, Taylor and I, like this, like super strong. I don't know if there's gonna be a day. I'm prepared for it. If there's gonna be a day where it goes like that, or obviously she's gonna have her own life and venture off to do her own things, but we've been A1 since day one, and the reason we started the podcast was because of that. It wasn't like a roundabout way to try to figure out how to have a conversation. It was like bringing people into our conversation because it was so strong. My wife has 2 sisters. She grew up with her 2 sisters, and they talk about my relationship with Taylor. You know what I'm saying? Like so many females always commend us about our relationship, like, and I say females specifically because she's a female for one. And also that relationship, I guess, because I'm not a woman, that relationship with your dad is a special one. And so like, if they see something special in it, in our relationship, then it's something that I definitely take heed to. And so we would just always have ill conversations in the house about life, about music, about movies, about, she enlightens me and opens me up to so many things. So I do like learn a lot from her, and I'm hoping she's learning a little bit from me as well. But like, yeah, you get to a point where your kids get to a certain age where now you guys are having different types of conversations. Right. And, she's made me so, open-minded to so many different things that I probably would have never gave any thought to prior to, which is ill. So to answer your question, again, the reason for the podcast was to bring people in. And then I looked at it as like, well, we have amazing conversations, so I think that's dope content. But also, sometimes we touch on things that other parents or maybe dads might not have a way to have that conversation, or not have a way to start it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a way that you can like listen to this and then like figure out, oh wow, that's crazy they would talk about that. So what do you think? Like it was that. And then it was also like giving her a platform and a voice, you know what I'm saying? And understanding that she could do or be anything. And that if, getting into media or journalism, anything like that was in her plan or her path, just kind of giving her that beginning, that jump start, because I think a lot of people don't have people to help them on that path, or at least a lot of people where I'm from,
Right.
you know, there was no nepotism because nobody had shit to give you,
Right.
you know what I'm saying, to start off. And so like me is just like always extending any of my opportunities and things that I've been able to accrue in my lifetime and making sure that they readily available to my kids. You know what I'm saying? Like I want to send my son to go hang with Jamal Crawford, you know what I'm saying? Because he loves basketball and Jamal Crawford is a homie. I'm like, yeah, man, like let's just go to his house and work out. You know what I'm saying? Like just have those opportunities to give my kids every chance in the world because they deserve it.
Speaking of, I mean, you listen to the podcast, and it doesn't. I mean, the chemistry between you, it's like it's not.
She is the star of that show, by the way.
You do well.
I'm just fodder.
But speaking, obviously, do you remember the first song? Maybe even it doesn't necessarily have to be hip hop. Song that you kind of played for your kids and it was a song that you're proud of playing for them because it was important to you. And then, do you remember the first song that your daughter played for you that you might have been like, it's gonna be whack, and you actually were surprised that it was not? It did change the beat. You weren't, you were like, oh, it's a different beat. That's great. Do you remember those two tracks?
Song specific. I remember trying to make Taylor, this is so bad, this is terrible parenting, but it's also hip hop parenting. I remember trying to make Taylor understand why Eminem was so important. I was like, there's not another writer, wordsmith, lyricist, song structure, deliverer. I was like, there's not a lot of Eminem. There's only one Eminem, but there's not a lot of people even in that class. And she was like, yeah, he was popular, he was famous, I get it. But like, why? And I'm like playing all of these horrible songs with terrible lyrics. We talking about we talking about Slim Shady LP. We talking about Eminem. You know what I'm saying? Marshall Mathers LP. So clearly the content was not what you should be playing for your kid. But I was like, no, you got to understand. Like, listen to the way there's a rhyme scheme within a rhyme scheme within a rhyme scheme. So like, it was so bad. But he was saying the most heinous shit. You know what I'm saying? So there was that. I remember so Taylor's been going to concerts for a really long time. She was like into music, and I was obviously a part of the business. And so I was able to use a lot of my relationships, So like I remember when she wanted to go see Diggy Simmons, and I knew people at his label, so I got us a backstage meet and greet, which was cool. So like I started her off on a totally wrong foot, you know what I'm saying? Because like her first concert ever was like, oh yeah, we'll get there, we'll get there an hour early, we'll go meet Diggy, we'll chill, you'll have front right at the stage, you'll take photos, and it was all downhill from there. So now it's like, yo, can we go see? I'm like, yo, I don't know these people, but we've gone to a ton of concerts. 5 Seconds of Summer, which is a band that she's into. We actually saw them. I think we saw them here at the Garden. No, we saw them in 1975 here. But she's like into a lot of different music, not just like hip hop and R&B. She listens to pop. We just bought her some vinyl for her birthday. So we were listening to the Moonlight soundtrack on vinyl. Wow. You know what I'm saying? Like she's ill. She's ill. She's a different breed. I'm not just saying that because she's my kid, but she's like an ill human being. Nicholas plays the worst songs ever because he's 10. He's like, Dad, did you hear the new 6ix9ine? And this is before 6ix9ine. This is like, because his rise and fall was really quick. So like, I'm going back like a summer ago. He's like, Dad, you hear this new 6ix9ine? Or you hear this record? And I'm like, yo, these songs are not terrible, but not for you to be playing at 10 because there's no clean version. You know what I'm saying? I'm like, yo, turn that off. Like, I love that we have a great relationship and that you feel like you could present and say anything to me, but you also can't just be playing songs with every F-bomb dropping every 2 seconds. And so, I try to put him onto a lot of music, just like classic hip hop stuff. Anything that has a sample, I'm like, oh, where they got that from? Like Lil Wayne has Uproar right now. So I would introduce him to like a G-Dep, you know what I'm saying? And then try to run through like the Bad Boy catalog, which sampled a lot of stuff. So then you run into like the Diana Ross catalog. So really just trying to have a rich music history. But one thing about my son is he listens to my music, which is cool. You know
That's
what I'm saying?
awesome.
Like, yeah, because sometimes you don't get that. Like Taylor, she be cool. She be like, no, I listen, I know it, I like it. But Nick, he like I'll go through his like YouTube search history and it'll be like a lot of Torae stuff
that's
in
awesome.
it, which is cool. I'm like, the CD's right there, right? He'll get like, it's on the computer, you can do this. But I'll take those streams as well.
I think right now I'm in a phase where like my kids listen to Kids Bop.
Word.
It's like go out of my mind.
It's huge. We were just talking about, so a homie of mine just had a baby and they brought the baby to the house and I didn't know about Baby Shark.
Oh yeah.
Yo, it's like it has a jillion views a second. Like,
crazy.
it's out of this world.
know.
I didn't know anything about it. And they were like, yo, he's like infatuated. And it's so crazy to me how music can do. Like as a kid, I'm not talking about he's 8-9 months. So he literally is just into the sound, the sonics, what it looks like on YouTube. You know what I'm saying? Like it's crazy how human beings, but of course when you look at babies who are just like sponges to it all, how they react to certain things. And although it's a phenomenon, right? You like, what about this is making it click with all of these kids? And even if you could like brainwash the 10, 11-year-olds with just like repeatedly playing stuff, if you play something for a baby one time and they cry until you play it again, that's like amazing to me. That's crazy.
It's a science experiment.
It definitely is. Definitely is.
I want to end this with a question I've asked like DMC and Yo-Yo, and it's about kind of if you look at your career so far.
Shout out to DMC and Yo-Yo. Let's just say that. And shout out to you for interviewing DMC and Yo-Yo.
Yeah, thank you. I still can't. I'm still can't believe I used to listen to their cassette tapes, and now I'm like talking to people. But you look at your career, and like it could be something that you're in the middle of writing. Who knows? But is there a lyric out there? Well, actually, two of the things, because I saw you do the freestyle with Sway, where you answered every question, which was pretty incredible to watch, right? But has there ever been for you, have you ever freestyled and then like thinking back to a freestyle you did and look back like, shit, I'm nice. Like, like, holy shit, that was a great lyric. And then if you look at your discography and stuff you've written, is there that lyric out there, that verse out there that you've kind of written or spit and be like, wow, I'm good. I'm like, I got this.
The freestyle stuff, like it happens obviously right in the moment. And I don't think I'm as good a freestyler as I used to be. That was something that drew a lot of people to me when I was younger, was that I had the ability, because I couldn't go into the studio. Like nobody had money for a studio. Nobody had Pro Tools because there was no Pro Tools. Right. Somebody had to believe in you. You had to have a deal. You had to know a drug dealer, somebody that was going to put you in the studio. You couldn't just have a studio at your crib. So a lot of my early stuff, like just kind of embarking on this journey as an MC was freestyling. If a cassette tape came with the instrumental, I was buying it because it gave me an opportunity to make a song, write a song. I didn't know anything about song structure, counting bars, but I knew I could write rhymes. And when the beat was playing, sometimes I would just freestyle. We'd be outside, we'd be banging on the table in the cafeteria, super hip hop cliche stuff. But freestyling coming off the head. So like, I never, this is before you could record everything and capture everything. So people would come back to me days later, weeks later, like, yo, you said yeah. And I'd be like, word? I said that? Like, that's crazy. You know what I'm saying? And when I had a few of those different moments, I was like, oh, wow, like, I'm like doing something with this. Because I couldn't, if I freestyle, like at 3 o'clock, 3:03, I don't know what I said.
Right, yeah,
you know
nice,
what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But those lyrics, like in that moment, would stick with people and they would come back and they'd be like, yo, you said this and you connected this to that. And, we were standing right there and somebody walked by and I was like, oh, wow, that's ill, so it's good to see I still somewhat have a little bit of that. I had no idea Sway was going to put me on the spot like that either, but Sway is a genius in that, he's somebody that I speak to often and I have a great relationship with. And he was like, I needed to make this interview different. I needed people because I've had you on the show before and you rhymed on the show before and some people get it and some people skip right over it. He was like, I wanted to do something that was going to stand out, that was going to make people turn it up and pay attention and really showcase your talent in a different way. And I was like, that's what makes you Sway. That's why you've been here for as long as you've been here. You mean what you mean to the culture because you constantly doing things like that and giving guys like myself an opportunity to perform on your platform, which is huge, which was dope. As far as written lyrics and things in my discography, I'll say that my last full length album and title is my favorite body of work of mine. It's just like it's so many different things that I touch on that project. A song like "Troubled Times," with Mac Wiles, where I'm literally talking about troubled times in different instances. But the second verse of "Troubled Times" is crazy to me when I if you listen to it, like I break down the cycle of a young woman in the hood and how her yearning for acceptance, never gets fulfilled, and then she ends up pregnant by a dude that has a daughter, and then like I tie in the last line of where her daughter's beginning to where she started.
Oh, wow,
you know what I'm saying?
yeah.
So like that's something like I listen back to that song, I'll be like, yeah, that's crazy. Or I got a song on that project called "The N," and it's the only song on the project where I use the N word. And the funny part about that, or the learning part about that, is when I dropped Daily Conversation in 2008, I had a song called "The Niggas Is Coming," produced by Crisis. And that word didn't mean anything to me in 2008. It was just another word that I used. It was in my vocabulary as an MC, in my everyday conversation. And then I put that project out, and I traveled a little bit, and I toured, and I got a chance to see the world, and I got a chance to meet other people, and I got a chance to perform on stages for people who didn't even know the language, but they loved hip hop, and they stood there and niggered me back, and I didn't like that.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And it wasn't with any malice or any ill intent. It was just what they knew as hip hop fans. It's just another word, like son, like hat, like kicks. You know what I'm saying? Like it's another word, it's slang, but like the 10th time it was like, yo, nigga, sign my CD. You know what I'm saying? I was like, yo, this is my greeting card to the world. This is how I'm introducing myself. This is the music. This is the content. This is the energy I'm putting out in the world. And it's coming back. And I don't want it to come back like this. And so I made a vow that I wouldn't use that word in my music anymore. And so that song, "The N," is END. Obviously, the N standing for the N word, was like me just explaining throughout my life where that word came from, what it meant to me, and how I gotta get it out of here because like I'm cool on it. You know what I'm saying? So like songs like that, songs like "Crown," that's off the project. I think it's just like it's also the reason why I haven't gone back in and made like another full-length album, because I don't know where to take my conversation yet from there. Like, where do I talk about now? I think I might need some more life experience before I go back in the studio and cook up like another full-length project. But that's not to say I don't need to still exercise, what I'm saying, my lyrical muscles, and that's what we get a project like All Praises Do to kind of hold my fan base over and to stay sharp at my skills until I get to the next album cycle. But yeah, that's like, I know I didn't fully answer your question with a specific lyric, but it's like those songs mean a lot to me.
Album All Praise Due, great album. I guess this Torae. Thank you for joining me in the library.
Tim, thank you, man, for having me. This is great questions, great energy. All Praises Due is out there right now. Check it out if you haven't.